going to sing. We want to show Chris Bowen that we are all good singers from Pacifica. And this is just a little composition I did put together for this forum. And I hope that you will all like it, especially as we sing and think about climate change that is affecting, and we need us to be united. That's my friend Osman.
Yeah.
You all got the harmony, you got the voice, you got the faces, so let's sing.
We are the people of Pacifika. We are a nation of God's people. We are the people of Pacifika. Polynesian, Melanesian, Micronesian, we are one. Islands of one nation, all sharing one ocean. One for all and all for one destination. We are the people of Pacifika. We are a nation of God's people. We are the people of Pacifika. Polynesian, Melanesian, Micronesian, we are one. We are the people of Pacifika, Pacifika. We are the nation of God's people, God's people. We are the people of Pacifika, Pacifika. Polynesian, Micronesian, Micronesian, we are
It is now time to hear from our politicians. So who do our politicians work for? They work for us. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. Being active voters in the electoral process enables us to have a say in who our government will be. So take note of what the Member of Parliament promises and hold them accountable on May 21st.
Oh, this is the part I'm supposed to get angry. Do it. Yeah. Missing in action. I'm supposed to be angry. You might have been wondering and asking what that empty chair is doing there. That empty chair is kind of very disappointing, upsetting. And to tell you the truth, they tell me to do it. Making me very angry. Yes. It should also make all of us angry. That is the chair meant for the member, for the LNP member. We have informed them about the climate change focus of this meeting. And we have tried all we can to ask the LNP to join us. But this is how much they think of us Pacific Island Australians. Yeah, shame. Missing in action. You'll start to ask, why are the Solomons turned somewhere else? Thank you.
Tonight, we are, however, joined by the Honourable Chris Bowen. He is a member for the McMahon electorate and also the Shadow Minister for Environment and Energy. So the Labour Party, the party that Honourable Chris Bowen is representing tonight, has not been in government. However, the Honourable Chris Bowen will be a key decision maker if his party does get elected into government following the May 21st election. So, we welcome and thank you for joining us tonight at the Pacifika Climate Forum. You'll have 5 minutes, sorry, we are keeping time, to speak, and then we will follow up with questions for time.
Thank you very much for coming out in such big numbers tonight for such an important event. I also want to celebrate the Darug people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and make 2 points. Firstly, that it is well beyond time, in my view, for our country to have a constitutionally enshrined voice for our Indigenous people. To the Australian Parliament, and secondly, as we talk about the impact of climate change on the Pacific, very importantly, let us not really forget the impact of climate change on our brothers and sisters in the Torres Strait Islands. Well, friends, I've only got 5 minutes. Very strict instructions. Before I do so, I just want to make 2 points. Firstly, just to warn you in advance, I'm 3 days out of COVID-19. I'm negative, I'm not contagious, it's all okay. But as those of you who've had it might know, there's some ongoing impacts, and so I think my voice will hold out. It is my 12th speech today. I think it'll hold out, but just a word of warning, I've got my water with me. Secondly, normally when invited to a function organised by a church group or religious leaders, I wouldn't be too partisan. I wouldn't be too robust in my comments. But the time for politeness has passed. And the time for plain speaking is well and truly here. And on May the 21st, there is a real fork in the road for our country. And in no area is that fork in the road more stark than in climate change. And again, I'm going to be very brutally frank with you and say, we in Australia have spent 9 years arguing about whether climate change is real, about whether the government should do anything about it. And even today, our government is arguing about whether they're really committed to net zero by 2050. Today, government ministers arguing with each other about the very basics, the fundamental core beginning. Net zero by 2050 is nowhere near enough, and they're still arguing about whether they're even going to do that. So there's a lot at stake. A lot at stake for our country. And normally a big part of my job is to go around Australia explaining why we should do something about climate change. I don't think I need to do that here with you tonight. Those of us, we're all residents of Western Sydney. We've talked about the impact on our elderly in particular of the ongoing additions to our heat waves. We're adding 1 extra day of heat wave in Australia every 5 years. And more people, I don't mean to be melodramatic, each year are dying as a result of that. It's as simple as that. And of course, You don't need me to tell you the importance in our region for all our Pacific brothers and sisters. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And what counts is what we do, not by 2050, but what we do now and over the next 10 years. And I have to tell you honestly, we're starting very late. We're starting in 2022 to do something by 2030. That is 92 months. That is not long. So we really have to strike with urgency. But they're the two key messages I want to give you tonight. Is that we know we have two things. We have agency. It's not too late. It's not desperately the situation that we can't do anything. We still have agency. We know the IPCC tells us. All these scientists tell us it's not too late. But we also have urgency. We don't have any time to waste. So we have to take action now. So, what would we do if we form office on May the 21st? Well, firstly, we will take the government's targets of 26 to 28% and increase them to 43% immediately.
Whoa.
And also we'll put in place the policies to do it. We can all have a target. I can pick a number. You can pick a number. It doesn't really mean anything. It's what that number represents. It's the result of policy. So we will have those policies. Some of them are being debated in our election campaign as we speak. We'll say to our 215 biggest carbon emitters around the country, we need you to reduce your emissions. And we'll provide a framework for them to do so, a policy for them to do so. We're talking about the biggest industrial emitters in the country. We are not going to reduce emissions unless we get our biggest emitters to reduce emissions. And it's controversial. The government's arguing with us at the moment. You see it on the front page of the newspaper. They say it's terrible. It's what's necessary. It's what's vital. And yes, it's controversial. It has to be done. We're going to... This next bit's not particularly exciting. You won't see this on the front page of the newspapers, but it's so important. We're going to spend $20 billion to upgrade our energy grid, our electricity grid, because we need to get more renewable energy into the system. And our energy grid won't cope the way it is. We need to get the renewable energy from where it's generated, which will be in rural Australia, regional Australia, to where it's consumed in our industrial heartlands and where we all live. That requires a massive upgrade. Our system is not designed to cope. We should all, hopefully, in the next few years, transition to electric vehicles, but if we all took our electric cars home and charged them at the same time at night, our system's not going to cope. We need to do so much better. And on electric vehicles, we need to reduce the cost of electric vehicles. We need to make them more available to people. They're wonderful things. I drive one, but I'm lucky I can drive one. We need to make them more available. There's so much more we need to do. We need to store that renewable energy that we generate. Our opponents say, they think they're very clever, you know. They say, oh, well, the wind doesn't always blow, and the sun doesn't always shine. And I say, congratulations for noticing. You know, the rain doesn't always fall either, but we all manage to drink water every day. Because we store water, we can store renewable energy. We can store it in batteries. We'll build 400 community batteries across the country, so that people who have solar panels but can't afford a battery can store their energy. We need pumped hydro. We need hydrogen. We need it all. We need to have the transition to a better transmission system, and we need to store that energy. We need electric vehicles. We need community batteries. We need solar banks, which we will build as well, so that those who don't have solar panels, because they're renters or they can't afford solar panels, can access them. These are all things we can do. We will take the Commonwealth government, the public service, and make it net zero by 2030. That's important as well. It all counts. We don't have the luxury of saying, well, we'll do this or we'll do that. We don't have the luxury of an either-or approach. We have to have the and approach. We'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do that, because we've left it too late. We've got a lot of catching up to do. So friends, I'm not here to tell you this is all easy, because it isn't. As I said, if we were starting 3 years ago, 6 years ago, or 9 years ago, it's easier. It's not easy. This is a big transition. But it's a hopeful transition. I'll leave you with this thought. There's enough doom and gloom in the world. People are worrying about things. If we go to the election saying, well, this is all terrible, they're not going to be too excited by that. We have to give our friends and neighbours a true picture, but a hopeful picture, that while it is late, it is not too late. Yeah. This can be turned around, and it is good for our country and our region It's not just an international obligation, it's not just an obligation to the rest of the world and our future generations. It is good for our country. It creates jobs. Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy because the sun does not send us a bill and the wind does not send us a bill. It is by far the cheapest form of energy. And this is good for our economy and it's good for our region. And this is my final point. Thank you, Reverend. He said I can keep going for 3 hours. This is my final point. The COP meeting is the most important meeting. At Glasgow, I'm going to be honest with you and say we were embarrassed as a country. The Prime Minister of Fiji said we can't let countries sneak in and then sneak out again. We know who he was talking about. He was talking about us. We went with no plan. We went with an embarrassing position. We want to change that. If we win the election, not only will we go to COP with a new target, we will bid to host COP in Australia. We want to send a message to the world that Australia is under new management. There's 10,000 delegates from around the world come to a COP meeting. It's a big thing. I'm going to host it at Fairfield RSL. I hope you can. But we will also invite our Pacific Island neighbours to host it with us if they choose. There is no better way, no better platform to give the Pacific than a COP meeting. Every world leader and climate change minister will have to come. And we want to not just make it an Australian event, we want to make it a Pacific event. I don't know whether we'll win the bid or not, but we'll be fighting very hard to get a COP meeting here in Australia, because it will send that message that it is not too late and we can make progress. Thank you for your time.
Just before we ask clarifying questions, I'd like to invite you to the podium, please.
Well, this is the time we're going to supposed to drill questions, but we'll ask ours anyway. Thank you for sharing all that honourable thought. Our first question to you is, what is your government's plan to drastically reduce emissions in the next decade so we can protect our islands from rising sea levels and disastrous climate impacts?
So, I think I dealt with a lot of those points. I don't want to, because there's a lot of questions. I dealt with a lot of them in the plan, but that is the point. It's all very well to have a target. You've got to have the policies, and not all of them are easy. Some of them are, very easy and popular, like reducing the tax on electric vehicles, but others are more controversial. But they've got to be done, and they've got to have leadership to do it, and they've got to have a political party willing to take the risk before election to say this is what we're going to do. And importantly, we will bring people with us as we do so. Our plans, I briefly mentioned it, create a lot of jobs, 604,000 jobs, because renewable energy is so good and cheap. 5 out of 6 of them in the regions, because that's where we'll produce the energy in the future. So these are very concrete plans in the policy that we announced last December. Because it's the target, it's the target.
That's great.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, what is your government's plan to make sure the transition to clean energy future is fair and just, so no one is left behind?
I think that's an absolutely key question, because too often politicians choose to use climate change to divide Australians. Even, again, I'll be very frank with you, the Prime Minister was doing that today, saying, well, they care about climate change in the inner cities and the cities, but it's the people in the bush who pay the price for it. It's a lie. But this much is true, that there will be people who need assistance through the change. People who work in traditional energy are good people. They're doing good work. They've been putting food on their table. There's nothing wrong with working in a gas-fired power station or a coal-fired power station. These people, this work should not be disrespected or demonised. It is good work. It's just going to change. But the good news is, we are going to need more energy. I talked about electric vehicles. We need to electrify everything that can be electrified. That's going to take a lot of jobs to do, a lot of energy to create. And that that means jobs, and particularly jobs in our regions, which is bringing people with us. 5 out of 6 of those 604,000 jobs are created in the regions, because that's where energy will be created. So people say, oh, this is